You are not here by accident. Something inside you, maybe an old wound, maybe a whisper you've been trying to ignore for far too long, has led you to this moment. The world moves fast, and in this relentless rhythm, it's easy to lose yourself in the roles we invent to survive. You shapeshift, you hide, you adapt, and somewhere along the way, you begin to confuse who you are with what the world demands you to be. But today, something in you refuses to keep wearing that disguise. Today, you are ready to look into the eyes of your own truth, even if it scares you. And that truth, so intimate, so raw, does not ask for permission. It doesn't wait for you to be ready, nor does it care if the road ahead will be comfortable. It simply arrives, and in its presence, there is no neutral ground. You either choose to honor it, or you spend the rest of your life running from it. You've felt it before. That quiet ache when you laugh in a room where you don't belong. That hollow aftertaste of a conversation where you played a part, smiled at the right times, and yet walked away feeling like you had left yourself behind. Sometimes it's subtle, a shadow that follows you even under the brightest lights. Other times it's a sudden, sharp sting, like the truth pressing against the inside of your chest, desperate to break free. And yet, you've become an expert at silencing it. We all have. You hide it under small talk. You bury it under productivity. You drown it in the noise of other people's opinions. You tell yourself it's just for now, just until the storm passes, just until things feel safer. But deep down, you already know. Every time you choose silence over truth, something in you fades. The edges of who you are grow softer until you can barely see them at all. Maybe you've built an entire life out of these small disappearances. A career that looks pristine from the outside, but feels like a cage from the inside. Friendships that survive only because they orbit around the version of you that's easiest to accept. Dreams that were planted in you by someone else's hands, watered by someone else's expectations, and yet you've been tending to them as if they were your own. It works, until one day, it doesn't. Because one morning, without warning, you wake up and realize the reflection staring back at you is a stranger. The smile feels borrowed, the eyes look tired, the life around you, the walls, the schedule, the promises, feels like a costume stitched together from other people's fabric. And in that moment, something inside you fractures. A small, imperceptible crack, but one that changes everything. That crack is not a flaw. It's an opening. It's the first breath after being underwater for too long. It's the place where light and truth slip through, uninvited yet undeniable. It will appear in dreams that leave you unsettled, in the sudden quiet between your thoughts, in the way your heart reacts to a sentence you weren't ready to hear. And every time it visits, it will whisper the same question. Are you ready to stop hiding? And this is where your journey begins to change shape, not in grand gestures or cinematic escapes, but in the quiet, trembling courage to take one step toward yourself, one step toward the version of your life that feels like it belongs to you, not the one you've been taught to live, but the one your soul has been aching for all along. The truth doesn't vanish just because you refuse to face it. It waits, patiently, quietly, like water behind a dam pressing against the walls you've built. Beneath every excuse, behind every well-rehearsed smile, it hums, low, steady, relentless. And the longer you avoid it, the more intricate the disguise you weave around yourself becomes. At first, it's subtle. You soften the edges of your words so they land without friction. You mirror the body language in the room, tilting your voice to match the rhythm of those around you. You hide certain opinions, not because they've stopped living in you, but because you've calculated the cost of speaking them out loud. You call it diplomacy. You call it maturity. And maybe it is, at least in the beginning. Soon, you become fluent in disappearing without leaving. You can be surrounded by people and yet remain entirely unseen. You slip in and out of versions of yourself, like a shapeshifter, each mask crafted with precision for the audience in front of you. It's a skill, yes, but one that slowly trades authenticity for applause. You start calling it compromise, adaptability, being easy to work with. People admire you for it. They say you're grounded, reasonable, someone who just gets it. And each word of praise is another stitch in the costume. It begins to fit so perfectly that you forget it was something you put on. But the body remembers, always. The weight in your chest before a certain phone call, the ache in your jaw after holding a smile too long, the way your shoulders tighten when you're about to say something you don't mean, just to keep the peace. These are not random discomforts. They are the quiet rebellion of a self refusing to die in silence. And here is the most dangerous part. The world will reward you for wearing this mask. Promotions will land in your lap for being agreeable. Invitations will arrive because you never disrupt the harmony. Approval will follow you like a shadow, so long as you stay inside the script. The system is designed to celebrate the illusion and to keep you afraid of living without it. But deep inside, a crack begins to form. You notice it in the way certain songs pull tears from you without warning, in the way a stranger's passing comment can pierce deeper than a lifetime of familiar voices, in the way you catch yourself staring out of windows, imagining a life that feels nothing like the one you've built. These moments are not accidents. They are the pressure building behind the dam. If you ignore them, they will ferment into restlessness. If you suppress them, they will harden into exhaustion, the kind that no amount of rest can dissolve. But if you listen, if you lean in, they will guide you toward the edge of everything you know. There, at that edge, you will find a doorway. Not polished, not safe, but real. To cross it will cost you the comfort of predictability, the certainty of belonging, the approval of those who only loved the mask. The what waits beyond it will be the first air you've breathed in years that doesn't taste like compromise. And maybe, though you've never said it out loud, you've been waiting for that breath all along. The moment rarely arrives as thunder. More often, it's a hairline crack in the surface, so small you almost miss it. A sentence someone says in passing that slices deeper than it should. A glance in the mirror one morning that lingers too long. Because the eyes staring back look like they've been dimmed by years of pretending. You blink, shake your head, tell yourself you're imagining it. But in some quiet chamber of your being, you already know something has begun to give way. And once the crack appears, nothing looks the same. Words you've said 1,000 times suddenly taste foreign in your mouth. The rhythm of conversations you used to flow through now feels mechanical, rehearsed. Even joy begins to feel suspicious, like an actor's smile held a beat too long after the scene has ended. And the things you once chased with urgency now feel heavy in your hands, as if you've been carrying someone else's life without realizing it. Your first instinct is to fight it. You double down on the mask. You polish it, tighten it, make sure no one suspects. You tell yourself you're just tired, that it's the season you're in, that all you need is a weekend away or a new hobby. You try to believe the lie because believing it feels safer than dismantling everything. But the truth is patient, and it knows how to wait. And then the body begins to betray you. Your chest tightens before certain phone calls, your stomach knots at the thought of walking into certain rooms. Your muscles ache from holding a posture of ease while your insides are screaming. Every polite nod feels like signing a contract you don't believe in. Every forced smile tastes of metal. You start to feel the performance in your bones. The weight of it, the grind of it, the way it robs you breath by breath. Inside, a war takes shape. One side clings to safety, to the familiar architecture of the disguise, whispering that you will lose everything if you take it off. The other side, raw, relentless, half-starved, is ready to burn the script, even if it means standing alone in the ashes. The tension is unbearable, and yet it is also the clearest sign that you are still alive. The cruelest part is that no one else may notice. To them, you still look functional, smiling, showing up, delivering what's expected. They don't hear the static in your head during conversations. They don't feel the way your hands clench under the table. They can't see the way your heart starts pounding when you think of telling the truth, not to them, but to yourself. Even the spaces you once fought to be in begin to feel like traps. The laughter you once joined now rings hollow in your ears. The compliments you receive feel detached, as if they're being handed to someone who isn't you. And the applause, the same applause that once sustained you, now echoes in a room you want to leave. On some days, you try to shame yourself back into gratitude. You remind yourself of the blessings, the stability, the life that on paper looks enviable. But the more you force this gratitude, the more it curdles into guilt, because deep down, you understand something you've never dared to say out loud. A life can be full on the outside and still starve you on the inside. That's when the questions start to change. You no longer ask, "Should I change?" That question belongs to someone still negotiating with the mask. Instead, you find yourself asking something far more dangerous. How will I survive if I don't? And in that question, the crack widens. The walls begin to tremble, and the truth, patient no more, steps closer. There comes a night when you stop running. Not because courage suddenly arrives like a cavalry to save you, but because you've reached the point where even fear feels lighter than the weight of pretending. You sit alone, the room dim, the air heavy, and there's a strange quiet that feels almost ceremonial, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting to see what you will do. Your hands are empty. And in that emptiness, you realize the only thing you can truly lose now is the mask. The thought sends a tremor through you, because removing it means revealing what you've kept hidden for years, the edges that don't smooth out, the truths that don't sound polite, the raw hunger for a life that actually feels like your own. You imagine their reactions, confusion, discomfort, maybe even rejection, and a voice inside whispers, maybe they won't understand. Maybe they won't stay. But another voice, quieter, older, murmurs back, and maybe that's not what matters anymore. Then, without drama, it happens. The mask loosens, not with the violence of something torn away, but with the inevitability of something that was never meant to stay. It slides off like a dead skin you've been wearing for too long. And in that moment, your lungs take in air that feels different, denser, richer, alive. It's the taste of rain after a drought so long, you forgot the smell of wet earth. It's not full freedom, not yet, but it is the first honest breath you've taken in years. You begin with tiny rebellions, saying no without the soft cushioning of an excuse, letting the silence stretch between sentences, allowing the weight of your words to settle, meeting someone's eyes without folding your expression into the safety of a smile. On the outside, these moments are invisible. On the inside, they are tectonic shifts. Fear doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It stops being a prison guard and becomes a traveling companion. Your pulse quickens, your hands sweat, your voice sometimes shakes. But beneath it all, there's a steady hum, the vibration of a life that is no longer running on autopilot. The world reacts in its own quiet ways. Some step back, unsure of who you've become. Others lean closer, drawn to the unfiltered texture of your presence. A few will try to pull you back, not always out of malice, but because they miss the version of you that kept them comfortable. You'll feel the temptation to return to the script, but every time you imagine it, you feel the phantom pressure of that mask against your skin, and you know. That memory becomes your anchor. The suffocating heaviness of pretending is something you cannot unknow. And so the risk of moving forward feels smaller, infinitely smaller, than the agony of going back. And then pieces of yourself begin to return, in the way your laughter surprises you, unshaped by expectation, in the way your reflection feels less like a stranger and more like an ally, in the way certain moments, fleeting, unplanned, feel exactly like freedom. It's like meeting an old friend at a train station, someone you thought you'd lost forever, only to realize they've been waiting for you all along. And here's the truth you finally see. You were never trying to become someone. You were trying to return, to strip away the debris, the false roles, the borrowed dreams, to step out of a story you never agreed to live and into the one that has been yours since the beginning. From here, there is no going back. The air is too clean. The silence is too honest. And you, for the first time in a very long time, are breathing as yourself. If you've walked with me this far, it means something in you has already loosened its grip on the mask. You've felt the weight of it. You've imagined what it might be like to live without it. This is your moment to seal that intention, not with me, but with yourself. Before we go any further, leave a comment below saying, "I breathe as myself." Let it be more than a sentence. Let it be a mark you carve into this exact point in your journey. A reminder that from this moment on, every breath you take belongs to you, not to the role you've been playing, not to the expectations you've been carrying, but to the life you're ready to claim. And while you're here, subscribe to the channel. Not for the numbers, not for the algorithm, but so we can keep walking this path together, step by step, breath by breath, into the version of yourself you've been waiting to meet. The first breaths are the hardest, not because the air is unkind, but because it feels almost too real after years of inhaling through the filter of performance. It's richer, denser, filled with textures you'd forgotten existed. You notice the way light moves differently when it touches skin that's no longer hidden. The sounds around you, voices, footsteps, even the hum of a city at night, carry a sharper edge. Everything is amplified, and along with this awakening comes a subtle trembling inside you, the echo of the old life calling you back. You begin to see clearly where the mask used to shield you. It absorbed the sting of disapproval, softened the silence after a truth too heavy for others to hold, filtered out the rejection that comes when people realize you will no longer bend. Now, those raw moments arrive without a buffer. You notice the discomfort in the eyes of those who don't know how to meet this new version of you. You feel the subtle shifts in relationships that can no longer rely on your compliance. Some of these distances will remain open, and that will have to be okay. At first, this loss feels like a fracture. You mourn people who are still alive, connections that still exist in name but have lost their heartbeat. You wonder if you made a mistake, if authenticity is too expensive a thing to afford. But then, in the middle of that ache, something unexpected happens. You start to feel lighter. The weight you once carried to keep everyone comfortable was heavier than you ever admitted. Without it, your steps change, your pace changes, your presence changes. You learn to stand in discomfort without shrinking. You stop rushing to fill silences that aren't yours to fill. You watch other people wrestle with their reactions to you, their judgments, their disappointment, their confusion, and you let it be theirs to carry. It's not indifference, it's clarity. You begin to understand with a depth you didn't have before that your life's purpose was never to be universally approved of. It was to be true. And then something else shifts. Certain people begin to draw closer. Not the ones who wanted the easy version of you, but those who are drawn to your unfiltered presence. It's as if authenticity sends out a signal, invisible yet magnetic, and it calls in those who speak the same hidden language. Conversations feel richer. Eye contact holds longer. And in these moments, you realize that honesty, even when it costs you, creates connections that are deeper than anything the mask ever earned. Some of these connections will be brief, like strangers you meet for a moment, but who leave a lasting mark. Others will stay, becoming part of the new foundation you're building. But every single one of them reminds you of something essential. The real you is worth finding, worth knowing, worth standing beside. These bonds are not transactional. They're not based on the roles you can play. They are forged in recognition, in the quiet understanding that you are showing up as you are, and they are doing the same. Still, the path is not without its storms. There will be mornings when the thought of being seen feels heavier than the safety of being invisible. Days when you'll miss the old disguise, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. Nostalgia has a way of romanticizing even the cages we've outgrown. You will remember the ease of certain conversations, the way approval once came effortlessly, and for a moment, you might long for it again. But then you remember the cost. You remember the dull ache in your chest that never seemed to leave, the moments you bit your tongue so hard you could taste iron, the restless nights when you lay awake wondering if you would ever be able to live as yourself without losing everything. And in remembering, you understand, going back is no longer an option. Not really. Once you have breathed without the mask, you cannot pretend the old air is enough. Once you have spoken without editing your soul, you cannot willingly go back to swallowing your own voice. The spaces that once seemed safe now feel too small. The roles that once earned you applause now feel like ill-fitting costumes. The truth has expanded you, and expansion is irreversible. So you keep walking, sometimes steady, sometimes trembling, sometimes unsure, but always forward. Because you've learned that authenticity isn't a destination you arrive at once and stay forever. It's a choice you make in every conversation, every decision, every room you enter. And each time you choose it, you breathe a little deeper. And each breath reminds you, this is living. There comes a point in every transformation when the noise begins to fade. Not because the world around you has gone silent, it hasn't, but because you've taken a step far enough away from it to hear something deeper. The constant chatter of expectation, the hum of obligation, the static of other people's opinions, all of it begins to soften until it's no longer the loudest thing in the room. And in that quieting, you hear something you hadn't heard in years, the steady, unbroken hum of yourself. Not the self you shaped for others, not the self braced for impact, but the one that has always been here, patient and unyielding, waiting for you to return. In this space, the urgency to explain yourself starts to dissolve. The reflex to justify every choice you make loosens its hold. You no longer rehearse clever defenses in your mind, preparing for the moment someone questions the path you've chosen. You stop scanning faces for hints of rejection or approval, because you begin to see that their reactions were never the compass you needed to follow. And with that shift, you realize something unsettling and liberating all at once. The world will keep spinning, whether you keep performing or not. What once felt like a threat, being irrelevant, unseen, now begins to feel like freedom. You start to notice what you couldn't before, the way the early morning light spills across the floor, catching the dust in the air like tiny constellations, the layered sound of your own footsteps on a familiar street, echoing in a way that reminds you of long-forgotten places, the taste of a meal eaten in solitude where each bite is allowed to exist without conversation, without distraction, without the need to fill the air with something. These details aren't new, but they arrive now with a richness that makes them impossible to ignore. It's as if life itself has slowed just enough for you to see what it has been offering all along. And in this space, you meet yourself again. Not the version who is trying to impress, not the one standing guard against disappointment, not the one who bends their shape to fit the narrow outlines others draw for them. Just you, breathing, existing, unadorned. At first, this piece feels strange, almost foreign, because it's not dramatic. It doesn't rush in with fanfare. It isn't loud or cinematic. It arrives without announcement, settling over you like a blanket on a cold morning, and it simply stays. But make no mistake, this withdrawal is not an escape. It's not you stepping away from life. It's you stepping into it in a way you never have before. Here, you are gathering strength in the stillness, learning to walk without urgency, to speak without editing yourself in real time, to exist without the invisible performance that once ran beneath everything you did. And the longer you sit here in this quiet, the more you realize this isn't the pause before life continues. This is life, the one you were too busy, too afraid, or too distracted to live before. you begin to understand that stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's a different kind of movement, one that happens inward. Without the noise pulling your attention in every direction, you start to feel the slow, deliberate shifting of the ground beneath you. Old beliefs loosen, long-forgotten desires begin to surface. The rhythms of your own body, the way you breathe, the way your heart steadies, become as real and grounding as the earth under your feet. This is not stagnation, it's gestation. In these moments, you realize that solitude is not emptiness, it is space. Space for your thoughts to stretch without being interrupted. Space for your feelings to speak without being silenced. Space for you to exist without needing to prove your worth in real time. And in that space, something ancient and familiar awakens, a quiet knowing that maybe, just maybe, you were never as lost as you thought. You start to notice that you no longer crave constant distraction. The impulse to fill every pause with noise, a phone screen, a conversation, a plan, begins to fade. Instead, you start savoring the pauses themselves. They become small sanctuaries, moments where nothing is demanded of you except to be here, now. And in those pauses, you find a strange strength, the kind that isn't built on effort, but on presence. The longer you remain here, the more you see how much of your life was spent in reaction, reacting to what was said, to what was expected, to what you feared might happen if you stopped running. But now, in the quiet, you feel the first sparks of living by choice rather than reaction. You begin to decide what matters before the world tells you. You begin to see which paths lead toward yourself and which lead away. And this is where the withdrawal transforms into something else. It's no longer about stepping away from what was. It's about rooting yourself so deeply in what is true for you that when the noise inevitably returns, as it always does, it cannot shake you loose again. You will meet it differently next time, not as someone desperate to be heard, but as someone who knows the sound of their own voice in the silence and trusts it. The path you've walked here hasn't been easy. You've loosened the mask. You've breathed air you didn't know you were missing. You've stepped into silence and discovered it was not empty, but alive with the sound of your own truth. And now, standing here, you can feel it. The ground beneath you is no longer the same. Neither are you. If you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of that first breath, the one that belonged only to you, the one that tasted of rain and new beginnings. It was small at first, almost fragile, but it has been growing with every step you've taken since. And you know now, this breath is your compass. Every time you feel yourself drifting, every time the old disguise calls you back, you can return to it and remember, you are no longer who you were. This journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about peeling away what was never yours to carry, about coming home to yourself in a world that constantly tries to sell you a different address. And here, in this moment, you know that home is not a place you find, it's a place you become. And perhaps, without even realizing it, you've become to see the truth behind those words we started with. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else is more important than fear. Because you felt the fear, walked with it, and still chosen the road that leads to yourself. That is courage. That is the work. That is the life. So take this with you into tomorrow, into every room you enter, into every choice you make. Not as a speech to give, but as a quiet knowing to carry, the understanding that your breath, your truth, and your path are yours alone. And no matter how loud the world becomes, you can always return to that first breath without the mask and begin again. If you've walked with me to this point, you already know. You didn't find these words by accident. something in you was ready for them. Maybe it was the weight of the mask you've been carrying, maybe the whisper that's been following you for years. Whatever it was, it brought you here for a reason. Before we part, leave a comment below saying, "I breathe as myself." Let it be more than a phrase. Let it be your mark, a promise that you will no longer shrink to fit into places that cannot hold you, that you will not dim your own light to make others comfortable, and that you will protect the truth you've uncovered here today. And since you've made it this far, take a moment to watch our latest video where we go even deeper into breaking the patterns that keep you from living fully awake. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Not for the numbers, not for the algorithm, but so you don't miss the next step in this path we're walking together. Until next time, take care of your mind, your soul, and your truth. You are not alone on this path. Not anymore.